Okay, so I'm gonna move all bajillion boxes. Hello, I'm gonna go ahead and mute everybody just so that we have that in the back. Okay, perfect. If you need to say anything or whatever, what I will do is at the end, I'll unmute everybody and we can have questions at the end. But I'll just kind of go through the content here. So the purpose and the intention of this particular webinar, it's about the immune system. And the purpose is to enlighten you, educate you, motivate, inspire you. And the intention is to leave you fully empowered to make some clear and conscious decisions for your health care as it pertains to your immune system. So we will work on that. So my name is Dr. Steele. If you are not aware about myself and what I do, how I do, and my educational background, I have an AS in psychology. I have a BS in natural healthcare sciences. So that's all like the scientific side of natural healthcare. I have a BS in alternative medicine. That's the modality side of natural healthcare. I have one doctorate in natural medicine, which again is more modality driven. And then I have a doctorate in naturopathy, which I chose to focus mainly on laboratory diagnostics and homeopathy in my doctoral training. I'm certified in functional medicine, so that's another 2-year postdoctoral laboratory diagnostic training. And then I'm also certified in integrative medicine, so working alongside allopathic doctors when there's a disease process on board. And I have dozens of other additional certifications in neurolinguistic programming, in leadership, in hypnosis, clinical hypnotherapy, all kinds of stuff. So lots of background, lots of education over the last 19 years. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. So the immune system is probably one of my favorite systems to talk about because it's all about balance. So the immune system balances self versus non-self. So when we say that, when we say self, we're talking about our cells, our organ tissues, our organ systems. Non-self would be considered things like heavy metals, toxins, bacteria, viruses, parasites, mold, all things that are not naturally occurring within the system. It's also a functional system, and what that's meant is that it borrows, sometimes if it needs to, it'll borrow organs from other organ systems to assist. So like, let's say for instance, if the body is overtaxed, it's going to use some of the endocrine organs to be able to balance that out. So it uses various organ systems, which I really appreciate. And it's also responsible for creating homeostasis within the body. So homeostasis is balance. And so the body's always creating that balance no matter what. We have become a culture where we are highly reactive when it comes to our healthcare, and we are merely focused on symptom. And so many of us believe that if we have an absence of symptom, meaning we don't have symptoms or we don't have a disease, then that means that we're truly healthy. And that is not health. Disease does not happen just overnight. What happens is that we as humans neglect ourselves. We don't pay attention to the basic necessities such as sleep, water, exercise, food, etc. And then progressively over time, the body begins to break down in nutrition. As those nutrient deficiencies happen, then susceptibility happens to the various things that are in our environment, hence environmental stressors such as heavy metals, toxins, bacteria, viruses, parasites, mold, etc., all of the above. And so we want to stabilize the nutrition of the body, stabilize all of the naturally occurring substances, the things that should be in the body, to strengthen our cells, our organs, our organ tissues, and our organ systems, and allow our immune system to practice homeostasis, but also to allow it to fight off, have enough strength internally to fight off the various different environmental stressors that we may come in contact with. So let's talk about little old Louis here. So Louis Pasteur, he is the one responsible for coming up with what we call the germ theory. So the germ theory is somewhat like this. I'm going to abbreviate. There's these kind of evil bacteria, viruses, these evil germs outside of ourselves that are subject to attack our very innocent, helpless internal structures. This actually turned into the basis behind allopathy, meaning allopathic medicine, the medicine to which we have all grown up learning about, meaning medical doctors and osteopathic doctors, doctors that believe in a diagnosing and managing model. So, long time ago in the early 1900s, probably even earlier than that, the germ theory was adopted by a businessman by the name of Rockefeller. He used this as the basis of his scientific evidence. And notice I put that in quotations because at that time, there was no scientific anything, right? There was the allopaths and there was the homeopaths. There was about 60 to 70% allopathic doctors, but there was a good amount of homeopathic doctors such as myself, and we kind of were in like a 30%. We were definitely the minority. So Rockefeller got behind, and if you guys are aware, Rockefeller was a petroleum, he was an oil man. You cannot patent naturally occurring substances, but they do work to heal. At that time, many doctors, including allopaths, actually use naturally occurring substances in their practices, and many doctors had different designations. So some doctors were MDs and DCs and DOs and NDs, and they had all kinds of letters behind their name because they're all different disciplines. And so each discipline has its own set of tools and tool bags that assist. And so at the time Rockefeller got behind allopathy, he financed the American Medical Association, and then he sent out a gentleman by the name of Flexner. Flexner wrote this report. He went out to all of the medical schools and pretty much discredited all the naturally occurring substances in support of the pharmaceuticals, which conveniently Rockefeller was a part of that because he took synthetic petroleum, which he had a fair amount of, being a petroleum man. He combined that with naturally occurring substances and created the pharmaceutical industry. And then when that Flexner report came out, it pretty much admonished any of the naturally occurring substances, and it said only allopathy will use drug therapy, and Rockefeller financed the allopathic doctors. And so they also financed the American Medical Association, and that's how they came into power in healthcare. And at that time, too, we went through the Depression, et cetera. A lot of the homeopathic schools closed because they just couldn't afford to stay on, unfortunately. And doctors such as myself, we continue to just become smaller and smaller in numbers. There is a resurgence naturally over the last couple of years because we recognize that if we don't repopulate our group of types of doctors, we will die. And so that's kind of what we're doing. So just, FYI, just for fun, look up the Spanish flu epidemic. That was kind of a part of it. It was a great way for them to kind of put pharmaceuticals out there and, just, put the message out there. So little history I thought I'd throw in there. All right, back into the immune system. So the lymphatic system, it's composed of lymphs, your lymph cells, your lymph vessels, your ducts, your lymphatic ducts. I guess I put that twice on there. That's funny. Fluid exchange between the circulatory system as well as the lymphatic system. So they work together in tandem. So arteries, nerves, and veins kind of run together. And so we'll see a lot of the circulatory and the lymphatic system have overlap. They move across those barriers. You'll see these kind of diagrams that show that circulatory process, that blood lymphatic exchange. The specific organs relative to the lymphatic system are your thymus, your bone marrow, your spleen, your tonsils, and then naturally some of the cells, your natural killer cells, your T cells, your B cells, your macrophages. All right. 5 types of white blood cells. Leukocytes is another name for white blood cells. You have eosinophils, you have your neutrophils, your basophils, your lymphocytes, your monocytes. You'll have elevations as well as declinations in your CBC panel. That's your complete blood count. And so there we'll get into ranges, but when there's increases and decreases, either in reference range or in subclinical ranges, they are indications of food allergies, reactions, pathogens, imbalanced microbes, inflammatory responses, diseases, etc. So it's good to be able to read that. There's two types of lab ranges. So there's reference range, what allopathic disease ranges look like, and then there's functional ranges. Those two types of lab ranges, um, are viewed in different capacities. They're different lenses that we're looking at. When we're looking at reference ranges, like I said, those are going to be more disease ranges. So we don't always want to wait until there is a disease. We want to prevent diseases from happening. And so that's why we use functional ranges, because there's subclinical ranges, but also too, when there's a lot of complexity, meaning there's a lot of decrease of nutrition and increase of toxic loads, the body doesn't have enough energy to express itself in lab tests. So it's going to give us ranges that are going to show us causatives of disease process. So in chronic disease also we use a lot with functional ranges. We use individual biomarkers and then combination biomarkers. So we'll look at what does glucose mean, but then if glucose with hemoglobin A1C, what does that mean? So the individual biomarkers mean things, and then when we put them together, they also mean other things. So there's a lot of depth in there. Not every lab is created equal. So I typically only work with trusted labs, scientific labs that I have treated with or worked with for years and years and years, because many labs, they just kind of slap things together, throw it out there to make a buck, sadly enough. Lab companies are going in and out of business all the time. And so I like to work with labs that are established, and I like to work with labs that have a good scientific validation record. So viewing the world from a disease versus health perspective is the name of the game. Again, when we're looking at reference range, what your allopathic medical doctor is going to look at, he's going to look at the world from a disease perspective. So if you go to the doctor, they say, oh, everything looks good in your lab work, and you don't feel well, it pretty much just means that you don't have a disease yet. And so if you don't want to wait until you have a disease or you have a symptom or something like that, then you want to look at your subclinical ranges, your functional ranges, because that's going to look at the actual health of the body. You're going to be able to see, oh, okay, so, I'm not digesting well, and that's leading to unhealthy bacteria in my digestive system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So once I look at kind of a basic lab panel, there's also some advanced functional labs that are looked at. So comprehensive viral panels are good for the immune system. Organic acids show digestion assimilation, like how you're breaking down your carbohydrates, your proteins, and your fats. Intestinal permeability testing, that looks at the lining of your digestive system. We'll talk more about that later. Antigens and antibodies get into exposures, viral exposures within the system, are also too with antibodies that shows reactions as well. So determining the amount of pathogen, the exposures, histamine or allergic reactions, those are all things. And there are different types of antibody tests. So there's IgG, IgM, IgA, IgE, IgD, and they're all kind of different types, and they're looking at different aspects of antibodies within the system in terms of, long-term exposure, short-term exposures, et cetera. So a lot of times as well, the immune system's working and we don't recognize that it's working, or we've been taught to suppress our symptoms. And so because of that, we sometimes do more damage than good. So I want to identify when the immune system is working, so you understand, oh, all right, this is my body actually healing. Maybe I shouldn't suppress this fever. So there's been a lot of controversy about fevers. Naturally in the allopathic world, if a fever happens, it's like, oh my gosh, no, we want to control the fever. Let's reduce the fever. However, a fever is the body's way of burning off whatever pathogen that's in the system, whether it be virus or otherwise. I tend to see high fevers in viruses, not always, but a lot of times, and then low-grade fevers in bacteria. So bacterial infections. Viruses are definitely harder to get rid of than bacteria. Bacterial infections are pretty quick to get rid of, usually a couple days. Viral infections can take, depending on the health of the host, it could take, 7, 14 days, etc. Just depending, again, on the health of the system that the virus is infecting. Inflammation is a sign that the immune system is working. So like if you sprain something, your body's going to inflame itself to be able to protect. Same thing with swelling, it's going to swell to be able to splint that area. Also too, if you have fatigue, so typically because your body's like, hey, we need to take all the reserves we can, all the energetic reserves we can, we need to go. That's why a lot of times when you are feeling not so well, you will be fatigued and tired. Mucus and congestion. So mucus is also a response of the drainage. So a lot of times the body will try to kill the pathogen, either bacterial or viral, and then it will try to drain it out using mucus or congestion. So a lot of times when we're treating those things, we kill the pathogen, but then we go through and we also put a drainer in so that it flows through the body. Itching is a histamine response. And then there's also autoimmunity, when the body's just gotten really overwhelmed and now it's beginning to attack itself because it can't decide what's self and what's not self. And we'll talk more about that later. In fact, now, so this is a healthy, intact intestinal barrier, and this is a compromised intestinal barrier. And so all of these cells, this is in the digestive system. Majority of the immune system is housed in the digestive system because it separates non-self from self. Okay, so these cells are nicely juncted together. This is the diverticuli, that surface. This is the mucosal layer. And then also to all the blood and lymph underneath here. So these cells are nicely, tightly juncted together. You've got your bacteria, you've got your parasites, heavy metals, all the things that are coming in from the outside world. And then these cells protect it into the self world. Okay, so this is what happens in a healthy immune system. It comes in contact and then the body attacks it here, or, they'll attack it, then send the waste down maybe to the kidneys or through the liver or whatever it needs to do to drain it out, or through the skin, whatever your primary drainage pathways are, which there are 5 of them: your lungs, your liver, your lymph, and blood, your kidneys, as well as your liver, large intestines. So it's going to drain out wherever it can, kind of to that nearest exit. So we also didn't talk specifically about food reactions, but when we're eating food or food-like substances, that also comes in contact here. And so there's a lot of food-like substances with GMOs and processed foods, etc. So that definitely plays a role in the digestive system. So these cells, over time, these diverticuli get inflamed, creating things like IBS, IBD, so irritable bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome. With other infections and co-infections, it tends to turn into colitis or Crohn's disease, especially if there's more of a reactive component to it emotionally. So all kinds of, colitis, there's all kinds of different names to it, but physiologically, it's very, very similar. There are some other pathogens that are, found. It's kind of different. There's different bacteria, different molds, yeast, etc. But in essence, it's similar. So these tight cells, they begin to break free. And as they break free, all of those toxins that were once now protected now begin to seep through. This is the basis of leaky gut. So now this intestinal barrier is compromised. Like I said, there is testing to be able to test the histamine response, the zonulin, the DAO, all that stuff of this particular barrier to see where that person is at. I don't often run it, but it is a good test to run if, money is no object for somebody. All right. So now this really kind of gets going. Again, stress, is like pretty much gasoline on any fire. Toxins, environmental, chemical, heavy metal, etc. Food particles or food-like substances, synthetics and within medications, pathogens, viruses, bacteria, etc. And then organ malfunction. So weaknesses in the genetic code, which then creates susceptibility. And then you put bacteria on top of it, you put viruses on top of it, you put synthetics on top of it, you put toxins on top of it, food-like substance on top of it, and then stress is just a gasoline on all of it. So now you're creating GI inflammation, this whole diverticular surface, this whole, and it's chock filled with B complexes and folic acid deficiency. So a lot of those B complexes get stripped out, zinc gets stripped out as well, because it's just pretty much attacking this lining. There's a lot of inflammation that's occurring. And then, of course, there's food intolerances that happen as a byproduct as well. If you're not breaking down proteins efficiently, you're going to not get the proper amino acids, and then you're going to be partially breaking those things down into the small intestines, and then it creates kind of a putrefaction process. So immune system imbalances happen. Autoimmunity, where the body just it can't recognize self from non-self because there's too much of this stuff going on. Like fibromyalgia, for instance, is a heavy detox disorder, although they label it as fibromyalgia. There's just heavy toxic loads within the body, and the body can't clear it out. Systemic inflammation, so that would be something like arthritis or rheumatoid arthritis, etc. Those are systemic inflammatory processes. Lupus even kind of falls in that category. Food intolerances, so those are reactions, whether there's sensitivities, intolerances, allergic responses, histamine responses, they're all a part of that, heavy itching, things like that. Nutrient malabsorption, so now you're not getting appropriate nutrition, so even when you are eating healthy, it's just leaking through and your body may or may not be receiving it. So that does release T and B cell cytokines. So we talk about like cytokine storms. So sometimes the body, even if you're putting good things in your body, if you don't know what you're doing, when to do it, etc., it can actually create this cytokine response that the body starts to even attack the healthy things that you're putting in. So that's why, using your testing and then knowing the natural order to how your body heals is very, very vital to be able to repair this. Just some quick ideas, nothing for you to go like, oh, go run and do everything. Vegetables, of course, are great. Bone broth are broken down, have a lot of minerals in it. L-glutamine is really good for helping the lining of the digestive system. Probiotics can be appropriate at certain times once you've cleaned all this stuff up. So a lot of times people will go and take a probiotic, but they haven't cleaned up any of this stuff yet. And so that's not necessarily the proper order to which to do it. Herbs, I tend to say for very, very last, although licorice root, slippery elm, that kind of thing, marshmallow root, really good for the lining of the digestive system. If this is an issue with people, which it is with most people, I typically will use a lot of teas to help soothe, because, they're not having to digest it per se or break it down or any of that thing. It just kind of, goes and soothes the digestive system. And because they're typically coming into me nutrient deficient, nutrient depleted, I do put them on vitamins as well as minerals. I put a patient on nutraceuticals, which are pharmaceutical grade supplements, and I do them in a certain biochemical order so that we stimulate the body's ability to heal itself rather than doing the body's work for it. So this isn't the order, but I typically will start with food first, clean up the food, get the food healthier, and then do some nutritional support with the system, then start working on detoxification and then healing. Trigger foods, these are foods that create a lot of reactions because of the processing of them. Gluten, wheat, flour, grains, cows, dairy, sugar, trans fat, medications, drugs, things like that all affect this particular system. Majority of the immune system, hormonal system, neurological system is all housed within the digestive tract. So any type of imbalance with the neurological system or with the hormonal system is all derived from the digestive system. So we first want to heal the digestive system before moving on to some of those other systems. So if you have a hormonal issue, or you have a neurological issue, or even you have an inflammatory process, if you don't heal the digestive system first, you're not actually healing. You're just masking and suppressing symptoms, or you're just throwing a band-aid on it for a short period of time. I do this balance of trying to stabilize and support the body and provide symptom relief while also going after the causes. Because if you're always in a reactionary symptom relief process, you're never going to get to the cause. And then, maybe you feel better because you're you're taking a nutraceutical instead of a pharmaceutical, but you're still taking something outside of yourself. And again, as a naturopath, we believe that the body can heal itself if given the right environment. And so our job is to create that environment. Supplements are just that. They're there to supplement the body. They're not there to do the body's work for it. So a lot of times people will come in and they are anxious because they've been sick, they've been feeling unhealthy, they've been unwell, they've been to every doctor under the sun, they're frustrated, let down, etc. And this has been going on in the backdrop for quite some time. And so even when the most subtle symptom was there, even when, let's say, they had a little bit of heartburn or a little bit of bloating or constipation, and they didn't really think of it at all, but now that, let's say, they're itching like crazy, or they have inflammation, or they're tired all the time or anxious or whatever, now all of a sudden it's like, okay, now I have to do something. So they come in and they're like, okay, now fix it now. And this is the platform that I'm looking at. So I'm like, okay, so, and we didn't even get into like the upper GI and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of biochemical chains that are involved with that, but initially, it's about getting the digestive system back into alignment, starting from the top down. So that's what a person's eating, and then how they're digesting, assimilating it, cleaning all this stuff up in there, healing all this back, so that I can reverse out some of these other system issues. So it does take a little bit of time. Also, depending on what toxins are in the system, that can take quite a bit of time as well. Toxins, to remove those, I mean, we have so many different toxic agents in our environment. Thank you, Industrial Revolution. We have just an immense amount. And of course, it said, well, there's only a little bit of arsenic in this, and there's only a little bit of mercury in this, and there's only a little bit of nickel in this. And, all these little bits create and build what we call neurotoxicity, and they continue, which is toxicity to the neurological system. They also create hormonal toxicities to the system too. Chlorine, which is in our water, is incredibly toxic to the hormonal system. But we swim in it. We, in the summertime, we shower in it. All kinds of stuff. So there's just a lot to it. And so making sure that we lessen our toxic load and then decrease toxins while increasing nutrition to bring this digestive system, which is so important, back into balance. Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, said all diseases begin in the gut, and we as naturopaths believe that wholeheartedly. And not only do we believe that, but we work considerable to help reverse different imbalances in the health by first healing the digestive system. So, all right. So without further ado, what can you do walking away today? All right. So keep up to date with your lab work from two perspectives. Remember, you have two perspectives. You have your disease perspective, so seeing your primary care once a year to say, nope, you don't have disease, you're good. But then also seeing a naturopath or a functional doctor like myself to look at where you stand from a health perspective. And recognize that health is not the absence of symptom or disease. Just because you don't have a symptom or you don't have a diagnosed disease doesn't mean you're actually healthy. So if you have any kind of subtle shift in your body and you're not feeling, super invigorated, I know I can tell when I haven't eaten 100%, or I can tell when I'm dehydrated. I can tell when I haven't slept well. I can tell when I contract a bacteria. I can tell if I get a virus, my feet get cold. I'm really dialed into the subtlety of my body. And that's really what I teach people, is to get real with themselves. Like, what are you doing, what you're not doing? People don't necessarily appreciate when I'm kind of up in their face about it. And the reason I am so just forceful about it is because people's lives are on the line. And so I pride myself of integrity and saying what needs to be said, even if it's difficult. I don't want to just candy coat, sugarcoat, and tell people it's going to be okay if they don't need to hear that at that time. Of course, I want to leave people with hope and encouragement, while also making sure that they understand that they have control and ultimate power over their health if they so choose. So making sure that you're honest with yourself. What are you eating? What are you not eating? Denial only gets you so far. 5 stages of change. We have denial, pre-contemplation. I'm thinking maybe there would be something. Contemplation, there's definitely something. Let me look into it. Action, which is okay, there's something. I'm looking into it and I'm doing something. And then there's relapse. So, and then we kind of go waver back and forth throughout the different things. We don't have to get to the relapse point, although many of us do, but it's not that you're not going to fall off the horse. It's just how quickly you're going to get back up and admit to yourself, hey, you know what? I didn't eat so great today, or I didn't drink enough water, or I didn't move my body. And so what do I need to do to keep going? I always encourage people to begin low and slow. That way you get those small gains and then you get some momentum and then you're like, yeah, like I'm doing this, I can do this. Health is built consistently through long extended action. It's not a magic pill. If it were a magic pill, I wouldn't be doing a webinar with you. I would be on a beach somewhere in Belize or Aruba, something like that, because I wouldn't really have to educate people. They would just take my magic pill and it would be done. So that's not reality. Reality is that we need to get those small gains. We need to go low. We need to go slow. And we just need to work on self-regulation, management, and holding oneself accountable. When you're working with me personally as a practice member, I hold you accountable. Sometimes you may not love it, but I do. And then if you're working with yourself, really wanting to self-regulate. Or what are you doing today? Are you tracking today? Are you drinking enough water today? Are you exercising? Have you meditated? Have you prayed? All of those things go into how much sleep are you going to get? Okay, I know it's 9:30 and I want to watch another show, but what time do I really need to get up in the morning? All of these things are self-regulating management and holding yourself accountable. I also urge you, we touched on this a little bit, to be careful with quick fixes, fad diets, detox kits, all that kind of stuff. It sounds great, and a lot of times people will make it sound wonderful. Oh my gosh, there's this and that, and this it'll do everything. Well, guess what? I'm still waiting for, I'm a Disney princess waiting for the birds and the squirrels to come and fold my laundry, and it just never happens. And so I just want you to really be mindful that, again, health is built consistently, deliberately over a long period of time. And so any kind of quick fix solutions really, and they're packaged very well and they sound good and the price is right and all that kind of stuff, but be mindful because sometimes you can do more harm than good. I always encourage people to start with food and let it be with your food first. So there's no fancy diets that are needed. I know there's a lot of different, fast this and, keto this and, paleo that. I mean, there's so many different fads out there. And I encourage people, to just really focus on what's whole, what's fresh, what's grown, minimally processed. If you choose to eat animal proteins like fishes or lighter, of course, I always recommend, if you're going to do animal-based proteins, to make them lighter-based proteins. Like, having a steak every night is probably not going to be recommended. It's very hard to digest and break down, number one. And number two, it putrefies in your large intestines and can create disease process. So, minimally processed, more of your lean cuts, 4-6 ounces, depending on, what your weight, height, and all that stuff is. And then I tend to recommend people to add things first than to take away. So, add your fruits and vegetables, add those things that are helpful to you. Take away those things that just don't really work. So like, if you don't, like, I'm not a big dairy person, that it doesn't, like, I can always, take dairy away. Like, it's not that big of a deal for me. But some people, if I say take dairy away, and it's like, they're like, can I give you my arm instead? So, it just, whatever it is that you have an emotional connection to the least, you start removing those things. And so supplements, so only are there to support the work that your body is not doing. They aren't there for long-term solutions. I don't agree with just supplementing everything in a pill and then, just give me a pill that has everything that I need to eat in it and I'm good to go. I don't agree with that philosophy. I tend to get people off of supplements and not keep them on, and I tend to only keep them on for certain periods of time, and that's really the benefit of understanding the biochemistry of the body, so that knowing how the body heals and how the body works, so people are not on long term anything with me in my practice. Let me see. All right. Oh, okay. Oh, I think that one. Okay, there we go. I guess I got an extra one. I will delete that. Okay, so if interested, I do have webinars let's see, we're in April this month. Next month, I do teaching all about women's health. And so we'll talk all about hormones, etc. I use an app, Body Site. That's our lifestyle app. I do have a 21 day to healthy eating program that I do through that app, that I can send to you. I also those are more of like our DIY kind of things that we do in our practice. I have lots of different DIY programs, 21 day detox programs, 21 day smoke free programs, all kinds of DIY things. And then also too, you can work one-on-one with me, in person or in office. I know that's funny. It should say in person or remotely, but it says, it's pretty much the same thing. And I do either a 15-minute complimentary consultation, or you can opt to do a 16-minute consultation. The 16-minute includes your blood work review. So I create a 30-something page, 20 to 30 page report for you and go over your lab work in detail and just tell you exactly where you are with your health and then where we want to go. It's a lot of deep biochemistry, but I do my best to try to evaluate it for you. I also evaluate 23andMe and genetics and methyl-genetic pathway labs as well. So that's a little bit about me and my practice. And so I think that's pretty much everything that I needed to say about that. So what I'll do now is I will open it up. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know. All right. Well, it doesn't seem like you guys have any questions. So if you don't have any, oh wait, hold on, let me see. Oh, okay, yeah. So in out of state, the way that out of state works is that I have a telemed app that I use. So like if you want to see like me face to face, or I can do the appointments over the phone. I can send lab orders to any lab core in the country, and so you can go to your nearest lab core and have labs drawn, and then they fax the results over to me. And so we have a electronic health portal, so you can jump on that when I do blood work reviews. And it's also kind of cool because I can record your lab reviews, etc., for you as well, just like we're doing today, so that you have, recordings, so you can go back and listen to your um, labs, your lab review. Yeah, you're very, very welcome. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I'm going to end our end our webinar. Thank you guys so much for attending, and I hope you all keep your nice and strong, helpful, healthy immune systems, and you keep working every single day on your health. And thank you for allowing me to educate you more about how to heal your bodies. All right, cool. Thank you. Bye.